Hi, in this video we're gonna add an edit functionality to our to-do application that we built about a year ago. I have the original application running on the left and the new application that we're gonna build on the right. Let's see what the difference is. First, I change the styles a little bit. I just add some margin to this to-do element and I remove this task and I move the whole form a little bit down. As far as functionalities, the new application kept all functionalities that the original one had. So I'm adding some tasks here, and let's do the same thing on the left side. As you know, in the original application we can check the task completed, we can uncheck it, and we can delete it. In the modify application we can delete our task that didn't change. With the completed functionality it changed a little bit. When we check the completion box, the task is being crossed out, and we can also uncheck it, so the line is gone. We can also edit our tasks. For that we have two buttons, edit and save, and right now the save button is disabled, so if I click on it nothing is happening. Our edit button is enabled, so when I click on it our task becomes editable and we have this border around it, so I can change it to whatever I want. At this time the edit button is disabled and the save button is enabled, so if I click save, it saved the value, and again now our save button is disabled and edit button is enabled. All functionalities work independently of each other, so you can start editing, you can complete it and you can delete it. Let me add a couple more. You can edit those tasks at the same time. And you can save them anytime you want. So let's start building it out. If you watch the original video and build this application, you can just continue it. But if you don't want to build it from scratch, you can pull it from GitHub, and that's what I'm gonna do. At the end of this video, I'll make sure that the new application is also on GitHub. So there will be two separate repos, one for the original application and one for the new modified application. So let's start working on it. I'm in VS Code and I went to File, Open Folder, and I already created a new folder. It's called To-Do List Original. You can call it anything you want. So it's just an empty folder. I'm gonna now open a terminal. So I can go to View, Terminal, or I can just press Ctrl backtick. I'm already inside this folder. And now I need to go to GitHub. I'm gonna place this link in the description of this video. But when you're on this page, you're gonna click on this code and copy this URL. So I can just click here. I'll go back to VS Code, and here in the terminal I'm gonna type git clone and I'm gonna paste that URL I just copied. So I'm gonna press Ctrl V and I'm gonna press enter. If I now go to my folder, I'll have this folder, to-do list in Angular. I'm gonna expand it. As you can see, I have all this code. Now I need to go inside this folder. So I'm gonna type cd, it stands for change directory, and I'm gonna type the name of this folder. Press enter, and I'm now inside this folder. If I try to compile my application, I'm gonna get an error. Let me show you. Ngserve. And as you can see, this yellow line says node packages might not be installed. When you keep your Angular application inside GitHub, you keep there just the main code. All dependencies are not being loaded to GitHub. The list of all dependencies that need to be loaded will be inside this package.json file. So if I click on it, so inside this file, you'll be able to see all the packages that need to be loaded. Let me close it. And to load those dependencies, I need to type npm install, press enter. And watch this left corner where a new folder will show up as soon as I start running this command. I'm gonna press enter. As you can see, I have this new folder that's called node modules. And Angular is now bringing all dependencies and placing this inside this folder. Our dependencies are loaded. Let's look inside this folder. So we have all these folders with all dependencies. Let's run our application to make sure it works. I'm gonna type ngserve and I'm gonna put -o It will compile an application and will open it in the browser right away. Enter. As you can see, our application is successfully compiled. Let's put it side by side with VS Code and start working on it. I'm gonna go inside our source, app, and I'm gonna open our folder with our to-do list component. So inside we have 4 files. We don't use this spec.ts file. This file is only for testing. As a matter of fact, we can just delete it. Let's delete all of this file. The testing file, it's not affecting anything. And let's open our HTML file, CSS file, and our TypeScript file. Let's start adjusting our styles. I want to bring this a little bit down. So to our H1 tag, let's add margin. And it's gonna be margin on top. And let's just do 20 pixels. Gonna save it. You can see it came down. Let's delete our task. So this is this label. Gonna save it. And let's make some space between this line and this input control. Let's give this form an ID. We can call it submit form. Control S to save, and I'm gonna copy it, Control C, go to our CSS file, and I'm gonna just scroll down, Control V to paste it, curly braces. And let's move this form down maybe 40 pixels. So I'm gonna give it margin on top of this form, 40 pixels. Control S to save. I think it looks much better. And now let's start working on our task in this table. Let's scroll down. As you can see, the task name is displayed as text inside this table data tag. To be able to edit it, we need to put it inside an input control, and we already have one here. So let's just copy paste it and modify it. So it's right here. I don't need to highlight it. I can just click on it, and I'm gonna press Control C, and it's gonna copy the whole line. I'm gonna bring it down, and let me make some space here. And right here, I'm gonna press Control V, so the line is here. And the type, we're gonna leave it text. Class form control, we're gonna leave it like that. So Bootstrap is gonna give us a nice look for that control. Let's change the ID. Let's call it task in table, so we know exactly where it's located. Placeholder, we don't need anything. And we don't need all these other properties too, so let me delete it. Control S to save. So as you can see, it's nicely styled by Bootstrap. So now let's move this value inside this input box. Inside this input tag, I'm gonna add value. And I'm gonna grab all this, Control X, and I'm gonna place it here and press Control V. Let me save it. As you can see, the value now inside our input box. Let me remove this space, Control S again. So now if we expand it, it's going to be expanded to the whole width. I don't think we needed that large. Let's make it smaller. Let me go back to VS Code. And we have this ID, so let's use it. I'm gonna double click, Control C, go to our CSS file, and it's ID, so I'm gonna put hash, paste the ID there, curly braces, and let's give it maximum width, maybe 200 pixels. Let me save it, Control S, and let's see how it looks. I think it looks okay. We could probably go to 300. And let's minimize it again. In the next step, let's add 2 buttons here. So we're gonna come here, and first let's add 2 headings. Control C, Control V, Control V. And here I'm gonna change it to edit. And here I'm gonna change it to save. So we have now 2 headings, and let's add 2 buttons there. So again, Control C, Control V, Control V. This button will be edit. And this one will be save. We need to change our methods and create new methods in our TypeScript file. Let's just call it onEdit. and this one on save. It's underlining it because we don't have those methods inside our TypeScript file. So let me save it. It's gonna break our application. I'm gonna go back to our TypeScript file and let's just copy paste this method twice at the end. And we're gonna change the name. So this one will be on edit and this one will be on delete. I'm sorry, on save. Control S to save. So we have two buttons. Let's change the color for them. So we can do it right here. We'll make it blue. So it's going to be primary color. And the last color, let me go to our Bootstrap docs. I'm going to Google Bootstrap. Go to this getbootstrap.com site. Go to docs. And in the search, I'm going to type button. Let's look at the colors and we're going to do this warning color. Let me save it. And the colors look good. Let's give all these buttons IDs and change their size. So this button is going to be delete. This one edit. And this one save. Let's go to our CSS file. Let's give it a width of 60 pixels. Control S to save. I think it looks good. And we're gonna do the same thing for other buttons. So that's gonna be edit. And it's gonna be save. Let me save it. I think it looks okay. So now let's look at this input control. So right now you can go inside this input control and start typing. We want to disable this functionality and it will become again editable if we click on this edit button. There are a couple of ways we can do it. Let's go to our input. Let me remove these two lines. Control X, Control X. And here at the end, I'm gonna add disabled. So if I save it, as you can see, this is now disabled. That's one way to do it. And another way, instead of disabled, we can type read only. Save it. And it's the same thing. I kind of like read only better. So let's use that. And to use it dynamically, we're going to introduce a new property in our object. So let's go back to our TypeScript file. And here, when we create our object, we're going to introduce a new property. And it's going to be a Boolean. And we're going to call it is editable. The start value will be false. So colon false. Let me save it. So it's broken because we're using it down below here. So we need to edit here. It works again. And now let's bind that property is editable to the read-only value. So what we're going to do, we're going to remove it and we're going to put it actually in square brackets. Read only. And I'm going to grab it. Control C, and I'm going to place it right here. I actually need to use T dot because it's a property of this object. And this is coming from here, from this variable. So let's think about it for a second. Our read-only needs to be true, not to be able to edit. So right now it's false because we start with the false value. So to reverse it, we need to put an exclamation mark. Let me save it. And when application reloads, as you can see, I'm trying to type, nothing is happening. This input control is now read-only. Let's now change it to not read-only if we click this edit button. So let's go to the onEdit method. And I'm going to remove everything from the inside of this method. I'm going to say this task array. And we have to use this index. So I'm going to put it inside here. I'm going to put that. And I'm going to say is editable equals true. semicolon. Let me save it. So let's see if it works. So right now it's not editable. As soon as I click this edit button, I can now start typing in it. Let's now use the same property to enable or disable these buttons. So I'm gonna go back to HTML and I'm gonna bind the disable property of this control to our new property. So it's gonna be T is editable, and I'm gonna do the same thing for the save button. Control C, Control V, and let's adjust it. So right now if I save it, as you can see, both buttons are still enabled. We want to disable this save button, so I'm gonna put exclamation mark here, Control S. As you can see, this button is disabled now. So if I click edit, the edit button becomes disabled and save button becomes enabled. Let's now grab the value of the updated task and save it into our array. There are a few ways you can do it. We're going to do it using local reference. So for our input, we're going to add a local reference variable, and we can call it anything you want. It starts with hash, and we can call it task input. After we have this local reference, we can use it anywhere in our template. Let's use it to send the value with our onSave method. So I'm gonna go inside the parentheses, we'll put a comma, and I'm gonna paste it there, Control V, and I'm gonna put dot value. I have this underlining line because in our method, in our TypeScript file, I need to add one more parameter. So I'm gonna go there, and here I'm gonna put comma, and we can name it anything we want. I'm gonna say new task, and it's gonna be a string. Let me remove all this, and I'm gonna update our array. I'm gonna say this task array, and we need an index, and it's gonna be our property task name, and I'm gonna use our string, Control C, Control V, to update the value, semicolon. Let me save it. I need to go back and save it here too, Control S. So in one more thing, after we save our new task, we need to change this property again to false. So is editable becomes false. Control S to save. Let's see if it works. Right now they're not editable, so I'm trying to type, nothing is happening. Let me try to edit this one. So I can update that one. If I save, it goes back to disable here and edit is enabled, and I cannot type it again. And I can do the same thing with these two. And I can also save it. Let's now work on our styles. There are a few things I want to do. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to change the style of this input control if it becomes editable. And for that, we're going to use an Angular directive NgClass. Let's look at it. I'm going to Google NgClass, and I'll go to the first link. And as you can see, this is a directive. I'm going to scroll it down. And in the description, you can see a few examples how you can use it. And you can list your classes as strings, array, and objects. We're going to be using objects. So this is the example for it. Let me expand it. So the way it works, we can play this directive inside this element tag. And inside this object, curly braces right here, we have properties. In single quotation marks, we have the name of the classes. And after colons, we have either true or false. And if it's true, the class will be applied to this element. And if it's false, the class won't be applied to this element. So let me just copy this line. Control C. Let's go back to our application. I'm going to go back to our HTML file. And in our input element, I'm going to paste that line. And I will have three different classes. The first class, we'll call it edit. You can call it anything you want. The second one, we'll call it not edit. And the third one, we're going to call it crossed. This values are hard-coded, but we're going to change it. This boolean is going to come from our object. It's editable. We'll do the same thing here for now. And this boolean is going to come from our property is completed. We'll apply this class edit when this boolean is true, and we will apply this class when this boolean is false. So to make it false, we're going to reverse it. We're going to put an exclamation mark. And for this style, we're going to leave it as it is. So let's create those styles. So let's start with edit. I'm going to go to our CSS, and it's a class, so I'm going to put that. Edit. And let's change the border of our control to orange when we start editing it. So I'm going to just say border. And I'm going to say it's going to be solid. And we're going to give it 2 pixels. And the color will be orange. Let me save it. Let's copy this twice. And here it's going to be not edit. And this one is going to be crossed. For this class, when we are not editing, let's just remove the border. So it's going to be none. And for the crossed one, I never remember the name of that property. Let me Google it really quick. CSS cross text. So I'm going to be just using this. Control C, Control V. Let me save it here. Control S. And let me save it here. Control S. Let's see if it works. Let's add a couple tasks. So when I start editing it, I have this orange border. I can save it. When I click complete it, it crosses the task. I can uncross it. And I can also delete it. I can also edit multiple tasks at the same time. I hope this video was helpful, and thank you for watching.